All right, I'm recording. Okay, so let's look at announcements. We have a test in a week. We have a test on Thursday next week, labs 1 through 7. So no Flask. Flask begins with lab 8, but up to and including the classes and objects of a class, files, JSON files, CSV files, normal programming structure, reading JSON off of the web. Again, functions, classes, just the sort of survey of the Python language. That's what's on the test. And then Flask started 8, so no Flask. Today we're going to carry on with the sort of Flask related stuff. Any questions before I get into it? All right, who's showing up at the last minute? Adam. All right. All right, so we know there's a test. We're going to be ready for the test. We know that all the materials that are on the test are also due that day to be eligible for full credit. If you're asking me, if you're just submitting work these days, then fine, send emails. But if you're asking me a question, the subject of your email should sort of specifically say help or question to give me more of a chance of answering it in time. Okay. So what did we do in lab 8? We started Flask, and that was so that we were working with Python as and Flask is helping us do this. We're working with Python as a backend language, as a server-side language. And so when we're talking about client-side and backside, we're often talking about using the web. And so we are writing code, and then sort of there's also sort of a web server in there, and then some version of what we've written has been delivered to the user as a web page. And we started off with just some words, hello world or hello Flask or something. And then we sent them some more HTML, and then we passed some information to some pages that were put on those pages using Jinja. And in lab 9, we got a little bit fancier. We had this concept of a layout, so that there were multiple pages, but there were things that were common to the pages. So the common stuff was on the layout, and then those pages, so there were the pages that used the layout, extended the layout. And so they had the common stuff, and then they had their individual stuff. And then we put in a navigation system as part of the common system to move between the pages. And in section 8, lab 8, we read some JSON, but we read it sort of the old-fashioned way. We read it as we've in the past read JSON files from Python. And it wasn't much different, but we read JSON again in lab 9, but we just sort of identified where the JSON was in a more sort of web-oriented way, or I was calling it on that day a Flaskier way, sort of just instead of saying where on my computer is the file system and where is the JSON file compared to the program, I'm saying where's the JSON file compared to like the home page, the web's home page. So just, sort of acknowledging more that we're doing like a web service sort of a thing here. Okay. Today's topic is to get information from the user. So we've been on the server side getting some data and putting it out to the user, but now we'd like to get some something from the user, some data from the user. And so we're going to, we've installed Flask, we're going to install something additional, WTF. And so that's our first thing here. Okay. So I'm downloading these files. I don't have instructions, but I have in a comment, and now I've made it app 4, so it's not going to overwrite my app this time. Where am I putting this? Documents 341. I made a Flask 2 folder in virtual environment. That's where I'm going to paste. That's where my stuff goes. Okay, and then let me open up code. And I'm going to open up code, open up the folder to documents 341 Flask 2 virtual environment. And what did I bring over? I brought over, that's not what I brought over. Downloads, did I extract it? I thought I extracted it. I brought over forms, that's a new I brought over an APP4. Let me copy and paste it again just to be sure. Flask 2, PENV, it's there, I can see it now. Okay, so I brought over, and instead of overwriting APP, I brought it now an APP4. I have a forms.py, we'll see what that is. And what else did we bring over? Templates, simple form, simple layout, simple form handler, and static, there was some CSS. Okay, so some of these things we've seen before and something's new. APP4 is now, and so I didn't give instructions other than this comment of we're going to start using Flask WT forms, and I'm just going to call it WTF because I like to call it WTF. And I'm going to install Flask, pip install Flask WTF, and I think I should have my virtual environment activated for that. And the activation, I'm in the VENV in my terminal down here, Flask to VENV, and the activate is in scripts. So I'm going to say /scripts/activate. I didn't spell activate wrong. Activate. And it didn't like that at all. All right, why not? Maybe no slash. There we go. No slash. Scripts/activate. There we go. So I've activated my VENV, and now I should pip install Flask WTF. And I'm installing within my virtual environment the WTF on top of the Flask, on top of the Python. So we had Python, that was like week 1. Then when we got around to lab 8, second half of week 4, we added Flask. And now that we're in the second part of week 5, we're adding WTF. Okay. Let me run it and then see. Oh, no, there it was. No, I got it going crazy on me, sorry. There it was, app, but I changed it to app 4 and Flask run. And now I'm asking for some information. That's the big change today. I'm asking my user for some information. It's remembering some things I've entered before. So I'll be Betty and say enter. And it knows it's responding. So that piece of information has gone up to the server, and it's on the server side, and it makes a new page and says, hello, Betty, and sends it back down to the client. Okay. So that's what we want to do. Control C. So we want to do this interaction, get information from the user, and what are called forms. So in WTF, the F is forms. Okay. So here we were in app 4. That's what we were, that was what was app.py before, was what was establishing the routes. So now I've made it app 4, and it's bringing some information over. This information we had before, import Flask, render template, URL 4, request, redirect. That was all there before. Here's the new stuff. From forms, import simple form. That's me. I have another file called forms, and I defined a class called simple. Okay, so that's one of the new things. This was old, that was just Flask. We've seen that before. Here's the new part. I'm getting from another file I made, a class I made. And so here's the other file, and here's the other class. So I'm now I'm using not just Flask, but Flask WTF. Bringing in a form. A form is what you use when a user on a web page is communicating with the server, the information is placed in a form. So a form is how we communicate between client and server. And so this is a form, and Flask is helping us make that form. So a Flask form. And then we're going to specify how we're going to, what types of elements are going to be on our page that are going to help us communicate. Let me see if I can go back without too much complaint. I can't go back without complaint. Let me refresh. It's refusing to connect. Oh, because I stopped it, that's why. Turned off the server and wondering why it won't I won't be served. So there are two elements here in this simple form. There's a place for me to enter a name, which is a string, and there's a place for me to click a button. I'm going to right click for a second and view the page source. Inspect is where I would look for errors. I want to just look at what's over on this page. Here's a form, and it has an input, and it has a submit button. So that was fascinating. Okay, so here we are back in forms.py, and that's what we're saying. I want they're calling it a string field. That means I'm going to make an input that the person can enter a string in, and I'm going to have a submit field, which is the button. And so I need those. Those are the things I'm going to use. So I import them so I can use them. Simple form is the name I'm making up for my form. Flask form is their name. So I am extending their class. So I have their class name. So because I know their stuff and can extend it, and then I give it my particular name. So my name was simple form. Their name was Flask form. I'm making a string field Then I'm going to encode call name. And on the page, I'm going to label with name. So they'll see, the user will see name, and this is how I'll refer to it in code. And I call them both name, but I could have called this full name or first name or anything like that. I could have called, I could have called this poop. It doesn't, this is what they'll see. This is what I will call it behind the scenes. And here's my submit field. That's the button. The button will say enter, but I'll call it submit. Okay, so that's all I defined here in my forms.py. I said I'm using WTF. I extend their class with my name, and I say I'm going to have a place for them to enter a string, and I'm going to have a button. Back to APP4. Okay, so that's what I'm bringing in simple form, and simple form says, hey, I want a string field and I want a submit field. Okay. This is more for later, but I'll just introduce it right away. When we're working with forms, there can be some security measures. And so you have this sort of key that you pass back and forth to say, I know that we work together, that this form and this server side are meant to work together, and they both know the secret code. Here is my route. This is just my made up name redirect, which I misspelled, but here is the actual redirect, which has to be spelled correctly. And this says, I'm going, if you go to the default route, I'm sending you to simple form. And then here's simple form. And this is going to be both the name of, we can change this, but this is going to be the name of the route for what the user does and the response to the user. So this says simple form right now, and I enter Fred and hit enter, and I'm going to simple form again. So the name of the route is not changing. We can make it change, but in this instance, I'm not changing it. So the route is simple form either way. Here is my definition of simple form. I'm getting the class simple form. I probably call too many things simple form for my own good. Okay, so this was, this said, this is redirecting me. This is the new route. And then this is the method I'm making up to handle the route. But this was from, this simple form was from the class, from the WTF class. Okay. And this says, if the form is submitted, that means if the user entered some data and sent it back to me, then it's submitted. Then I'm going to get the information. This is my code 31 for getting the information off the page. And then I'm going to go to the simple form handler, which is something in my templates. And then this return here is if that if didn't work, if the form is not submitted, then I'm going to simple form.html. That means the first time I go to simple form, simple_form. But if the user enters stuff and submits, then I'm going to form handler. So now I need to look at form and form handler. Okay, so here's form. And here is how we communicate with, let me go back here for a second. Here's the way we send information before. Here's the title. Here's the header. That's just simple string information. Here is the result. So if I'm going to the handler, I send it the result. If I'm going to the original form, I send it the form. And the form is the simple form, and it knows that I want a name and a submit button. So I've sent that information, form equals form. I've sent that information to my simple form template. And so here I'm saying I want the label of the name, which is name. And then I want the actual name thing, which is an input of the text type. And then down here, I say I want my submit button. So that is me designing this. Can I go back? I can. That was me designing this page. Here was the label. Here was the actual string input. Here was the submit button. There. Okay. And so then what else? If the user enters the data and then the results are called the result, and they are sent to the simple form handler. Here's the simple form handler. No, simple form handler, there it is. And all it does is says hello, and we send it the result, and we're asking for the name field of the result. Questions? There's no one line that's hard to understand the logic of, but it's a lot of little pieces of back and forth. This has got to match that. And there's this file and that file. So we're playing a back and forth game between at least 4 main files. And then there's also a layout, it's probably 5 files. Okay, but there was the APP4 that set up the routes. But one of the routes was a form. So we defined what we wanted in the form over in forms.py. And then the form was when we are not, when the form is not submitted, we're going to the form and we're passing it the form information. When the form is submitted, we're going to the handler and we're sending it the result information. So it's a lot of little back and forth. Takes a little getting used to. Don't go into test 2 without having, sort of done a lot of this back and forth and get used to it. You have to put things in the right place. You have to know what goes where. Not hard, but confusing in the beginning. And I had these 2 guys, simple form was extending simple layout. So there was a simple layout. We played that game the other day. So there was some common stuff, not too much common stuff this time, but there was some common stuff and some unique stuff. And there was also a style. So, and that was in the style I called here simple. So here was the simple style. Okay. So that was fun. Now all we're going to do is in this lab, in this today, and maybe for the next 2 or 3 labs other than the test next week, we're just going to be adding different types. Oh, what if you want to drop down list? What if you want radio buttons? What if you want check boxes? Okay, so our next thing is a select field, which is a drop down. Okay, so here's everything again. Let me extract it. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to find my Flask 2 folder, find the virtual environment, paste it in there. I'm replacing everything. Okay, here we go. Close it and open everything again. Okay, so I overwrote APP4. Did anything change here? No, not. I think I'm just going to change what's on the form, not change the routes. So nothing changed here. I'm going to change forms because I'm adding a drop-down list. Okay, so here's what I added in the imports, select field. I'm adding a new type of input. Here's the name and the submit button that I had previously. And a drop-down list is, there's a set of choices and then sort of some name for what the user chose. So I have two of them. You're going to choose a language and you're going to choose a color. Okay, so this is my just name for my variable. I'm going to have a select that has something to do with picking a language, programming language. I'm going to have, the first thing I'm going to have is its label. So this is what the user is going to see on the page. It's going to say programming language and then the sort of prompt. And then here are the choices. These are the options in the drop-down list. This is a list. Square bracket is a list in Python of parentheses are tuples. So it is a list of tuples. And in drop-downs, in HTML, in drop-downs, you have the value, which is what you use behind the scenes in code. And then you have what the user sees. So this is what the user is going to see. And this is what we're going to work with behind the scenes. So that's our notion. So these are going to be turned into options and loaded up in my drop-down list. And the label for my drop-down list is going to say programming language. And down here, I just have red, green, and blue, and I have the value is going to be a hex code for that color. So that is the idea there. So the change here, I added in my imports a select field, and I've added two select fields. I've added a language select field, and I've added a color select field. There was nothing over here on the routes because they're just routes. And then the simple form now has, here's a place for the name, here's a place for the language, here's a place for the color, here's the submit button. So they're going to be a place for them to write a name, a place for them to pick a language, a place for them to pick a color, a place for them to click a button. And then the handler is going to say hello to the name. Remember, these curly things are called Jinja or Jinja2. There's a Jinja comment. Here is the language going to be displayed. Here's the color going to be displayed. And I don't do anything for the button. It was clicked. That's how I got here. Okay, let me Control C and start it again. So now it's got the name and the two. So who will I be? I'll be Vincent Van Gogh. And JavaScript and green. Okay. And not only did I display the page, but I could also use the information in certain ways. So in the handler, I'm not only displaying the color, but I am using the color to make something, to turn something that color. So here was me just on the page saying, hey, you chose green. And then here's me, I have a div and making that div, making its background color match the information. So I can display information. I can also do other things with the information. You can send me the name of an image or something like that, and then I can, put that image on my page. There are different things I can do other than just display words. Okay, so that was it. That's that example. Just add drop-down list. Okay. Questions? No. All right. And I think there's one more. And then it's your turn. Now I'm going to enter the first thing had a string field and a button. And then we added the 2 drop-down lists. Now we're going to add something that looks an awful lot like the first one, except it's meant for numbers. So it's going to be a numerical input. So they should type a number rather than like words. Okay. So extract, copy everything. 341, Flask 2, VENV, replace all. Okay, and I remind you that you send me what I sent you. So if you were sending me stuff, it's probably, this may be overkill, but you would send me like this. Don't send me your configuration file. I don't need it. Don't send me your scripts file. I don't need it. And IT is going to complain like mad if you do. So that it's these PYs and the templates and the static, these folders, but not scripts, not scripts. That's what you would zip up and send me. That's what I'm sending you. That's what you send me. And I try to clean up and not send you extra crap. So I try, this JSON's still sitting there from before, but it's not part of this project. So I would try to clean that out. So before I zip things up and send it to you or put it on my page, I usually try to just have the relevant things. Sometimes I miss, sometimes I have something I don't need in there. Okay. So now let's look at it. App 4, still no change because it's just the routes. I'm going to have a form and a form handler, and the routes are the same for them. It's just whether or not the form was submitted or not. So there's nothing there. There's something new in forms. There should be a new type of thing here. So there's a new submit field, select field that was there before, integer field and decimal field. So a place to enter sort of integer whole numbers and a place where I can have fractional parts. So that's just saying in my imports, things I'm going to use. I have the name field, I have the button, I have the drop-down list or the select for languages, I have this drop-down select for colors. Here is my hours. So they're going to enter the number of hours they worked this week as an integer. So they can't work any half hours, they have to work full hours for me. And then there's a decimal. They're going to say I make a wage and it can have fractional parts, so it is a decimal. Okay, so that's what I'm saying is on my form. There was nothing in APP4, that was just the routes, but now the simple form should have changed because there's more things on the form now. There's the name, there's the language, there's the color. Here are the hours, and it's this usual pattern of bring over the label and then bring over the thing itself. So bring over the label that will say hours, or you could say enter your hours. So I just said hours here, but if I wanted it to say enter your hours or how much did you work this week, that's here. So I could change that here. So, so I added the hours and the wage. And then I have some stuff on the handler. So here's me playing around with the name and just showing different ways of working with Jinja. So Jinja is this curly bracket percent type of a thing. And I'm saying if there is a name, then I'm going to say there are different ways of concatenating. I'm going to put the name in. So I say, hey there, and then have the name. I'm saying hi there with a percent, and then I'm going to put the result in sort of as the percent. And then I have this like dot format, which is more like Python-y. That we've sort of seen that dot format thing before when we were playing Python. So just different ways of interacting with Jinja. And we also had Jinja supports a control structure. So if they didn't enter a name, you could say right on the web page, no name. Here's me displaying the language. Here's me displaying the color, but also making the div a particular color. Here's me displaying the hours. Here's me displaying the wage. The wage comes in and I'm casting it as a float and I'm showing it with 2 decimal places. Okay. Then I'm going to do a calculation. I can calculate in Python. So I could have done this calculation. I could have gotten the data, the hours and the wage from the page, done my calculation in Python, sent my result of my salary as a piece of information over to the page. So I can calculate in app 4, and my app 4 hasn't changed in a while because I've just been doing it for routes. But it is Python, and I can do Python things there, like do this calculation. But I'm doing the calculation here in Jinja instead. And Jinja is a little bit harder than Python. We've been playing with Python for 4 or 5 weeks now, but this is Jinja, it's newer. This says, get the hours and cast it as an int. And call it H, and get the wage and cast it as a float. And that's W. And then if the hours are bigger than 40, I'm going to pay overtime and display the answer. And otherwise, I'm going to do a different calculation and display the answer. And so let's stop what was running before, start it up again. Control click. So here's the name, Franz Mark. Franz Mark knows Python. Franz Mark likes red. And Franz Mark worked 45 hours this week at $10 an hour. And so for the 5 hours that he worked over 40, he gets time and a half. So for those last 5 hours, he gets $15, not 10. So that's why it's $4.75. Yada, yada, yada. I think that's what I wanted to show you. What are you responsible for? I usually have you make some variation on what I just made. And it's one of my standard opening programs, the restaurant calculator. Okay. So what do we have? We have you're going to send me this stuff. So you'll have something in static, a little bit of style, templates. You'll have some apps, some forms. You'll have some shared layout. You're basically going to do what I did. You're not going to allow them to just enter any tip amount. You're going to use a select. So you're going to have certain pre-selected percentages, 10, 15, or yeah, you can make it 10, 15, 20, 25, etc. And remember that there's something behind the scenes and something that the user sees. So what you can make the user see 15%, and then behind the scenes you can do 0.15. It saves you, you don't want the percent sign behind the scenes, or you might do the divide by 100. And then, so you're going to have a place for them to enter their bill, which will be a decimal number. You'll have a place for them to enter the percentage, which you're going to use a drop-down list. There'll be a button, and then there'll be a page to handle that. So you'll say your bill was some amount, the percentage was some percentage, and then the calculation. Here's what you owe. Okay, so that's what you have to do. Any questions? I'm going to stop recording.